As we all get ready for Election Day, November 8th, a group of organizations here in New Mexico and nationally are working to re-incentivize civil discourse and bipartisan collaboration across government. New Mexico First and the Election Reformers Network are just two groups working to promote a new initiative from the Carter Center, a set of candidate principles for trusted elections. The bipartisan effort is meant to encourage candidates, political parties, and voters to uphold 5 core doctrines of democratic elections: integrity, nonviolence, security, oversight, and the peaceful transfer of power. Senior producer Lou DeVizio spoke with two people about how they plan to use this initiative and others to decrease political polarization in our state and in our country.
It's election season, and joining me today are two people who are dedicated to keeping the electoral process open and accessible for all voters. We have Heather Ballas. She's the Vice President of Programs at the Election Reformers Network, and she's also the former Executive Director of New Mexico First. Danielle Gonzalez is the current Executive Director of New Mexico First. It's an organization that's meant to engage New Mexicans in policy, ideally pushing them towards democratic action. Thank you both for being here. The level of polarization is undeniably growing nationally here in New Mexico. Are there philosophies that have changed within political parties or society as a whole that have contributed to this?
Yeah, I think it's no question that our democracy is in crisis. And it's not just the democracy overall, but it's the fabric that holds us together as a society. And I think one key change that has happened over the last 10 to 15 years is in politics, there used to be incentives to work across the aisle. When New Mexico First was founded in 1986, it was founded by Senator Domenici and Senator Bingaman, a Republican and a Democrat, who had experience of working together and saw the true benefits of working together. Now we live in a society where if you're a Democrat who works with Republicans frequently, or you're a Republican who works with Democrats frequently, you get called bad things. And it really makes me think about, there's this comic that I saw, I think it's a Far Side comic, and it's two dogs sitting at a bar and they're drinking a martini, and one dog's turning to the other and says, "It's not enough that us dogs win, the cats have to lose too." And that really is how things are reflected in society today. And it's not just the partisan differences that I think are increased, it's hard for us as Americans, as New Mexicans, to work across difference, to work across urban versus rural, or age, gender, race. There's just become so much divisiveness in our society overall, which has huge implications, not just for democracy and elections, but also education and healthcare and so many other important issues.
I think the biggest drivers of the changes are social media and the rise of cable news. At least I would say those are very significant drivers of the type of polarization that Danielle is talking about. Both of those types of entities, whether for easy ratings or multiple clicks, tend to say that every issue is divided upon an extreme right and an extreme left, right? It's easy to book guests that take that approach, and it's easy to put the extremists on screen because they're the ones that are going to say the most outlandish things and the things that are most going to be quickest and easiest to going forward. But in my view, the taking of any issue and boiling it down to an extreme right and an extreme left is unconscionably reductive.
Now, these candidate principles, can you describe exactly what you're asking candidates to do?
They're sort of predicated on the notion that the same notion that we all probably got in 7th grade social studies, the one that says democracy is predicated on the consent of the governed, right? Consent of the governed means that we, as the people that are willing to be governed, say, yeah, okay, I'm on board. We're on board if we have confidence in our leaders and we have confidence in the process by which those leaders were selected. So there's a whole host of ways that we can strengthen those things. One of them would be these candidate principles for trusted elections that do ask our candidates for public office to agree to 5 baseline principles for practical and ethical behavior as it comes to how they're running for office. And that includes being honest about the electoral process. That includes denouncing threats or acts of violence against their opponent or their opponent's family or election workers. That includes respecting people's right to vote free of intimidation. That includes ensuring that poll workers themselves that are representing candidates behave respectfully when they're doing that poll watching job. And lastly, and probably most importantly, is adhering to the rule of law. That means recognizing at the end of the day who won or lost the election. And that's not saying that if somebody who's running for office can't call for recounts and can't take concerns to the courts. But at the end of the day, once all of those legal contestations are decided, we're asking candidates to say we'll follow the rule of law and accept the results as are ultimately decided either by election officials or the courts.
Now, Danielle, are you aware that this is something that New Mexican voters wanted to see, to know that this is where their candidates are coming from?
Yeah, which is fascinating and kind of counter to the whole conversation that we were just having. But yes, there's actually been polling about this. When you ask people, would you vote for candidates who would stand up for what's right, who would follow the honest processes, who would support the results of the election, people actually say yes, and it's pretty compelling. And so we're really excited about that and excited to be one of the organizations here in New Mexico leading the Candidate Principles Project. But it's not just New Mexico First, so it's the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce, New Mexico Open Elections, the New Mexico Local News Fund, New Mexico Public Broadcasting Service. It's exciting that there's so many organizations that just represent a variety of perspectives here in New Mexico coming together to work on this project, which is essentially reaching out to candidates across the state and asking them, will you sign on to these principles? And then a whole second part of it that is promoting that to the voters. And again, as we just discussed, it's really exciting that voters are actually saying, you know what, this is something that might guide and inform my vote.
Now, you mentioned to me in our pre-conversation about some reforms that could happen to also push this along.
So it's not directly tied to the candidate principles. It's instead a standalone bill that we hope will be introduced in the upcoming legislative session. And it's focused on the role of the Secretary of State and our county clerks. And just this week, the Election Reformers Network has released new national polling data that asked voters how important it was that their election administrators behave in an impartial manner. And it won't surprise you to know that Democrats, Republicans alike, they want this badly. They think it's very important, to the tune of 95% of them think it's very important. And then when you take that group, though, and you pull it down a little bit further, 68% of them, 2/3 roughly, of the folks polled also said that they have a hard time trusting the impartiality of their election officials when those folks are elected with the backing of a major party. And so this is America. That's how we do it, right? We elect people in a partisan election. But the thing is that doesn't have to be done that way. And so the opportunity to say, how do we sort of depoliticize those roles also has a profound effect on the confidence that voters have that the election's being administered fairly. So the bill that we're looking to introduce would do three things, and they're just common sense, simple things. One is that election officials would be prohibited from endorsing candidates in the elections that they're overseeing, which most people go, well, aren't they prohibited from doing that already? And the answer is they're not prohibited, but most of them don't do it. It would also prohibit them from fundraising for candidates in the elections they're overseeing. And it would require them to recuse themselves if there was an election dispute over their own race. So three simple common sense things. In doing that, the suggestion is not being made because we're trying to be accusatory or imply that those folks are doing their jobs badly right now. I think quite the contrary. They're doing heroic work, a job that's really hard, and in the political environment we're in is getting harder every day.
Now, looking ahead to November 8th, is there anything that either of you would be looking for, some sort of a barometer through voters, through public perception, that we're on the right track, moving a little bit away from that ultra polarization and towards strengthening and reinvigorating our democracy?
I mean, I think I would be remiss to not mention the candidate principles.
Sure.
And so to the degree to which candidates are willing to sign on to those principles and which voters are saying these matter to me, I think that's a huge indicator and barometer that this is important. I think the other is obviously voter turnout rates. That's critically important. And then I think once the election comes and goes, we really need to have folks accept results when it's clear. And so to Heather's point earlier, that it's entirely acceptable to issue challenges, to ask for recounts, but there is a point at which candidates and their parties and their supporters must accept those results. So I think if all of those things happen, I think that's the best indicator that we are in a good place. But I won't pretend that it all is going to end on November 10th. Right? Like this is the midterm election. We've got another election coming in 2 years. And so this is just going to continue to build. So I'm really excited to think about this as sort of a first step, or all of these initiatives together as first steps to help rebuild what has begun to break and to have some cracks, as we talked sort of at the beginning of the interview.
Heather, something you'll be looking for in this election moving into 2024 also?
Something that I'm looking for right now on the candidate principles front is not just for the candidates themselves to sign on to those, but also for organizations and voters. And so one of the things I would share with your viewers is that whether they're running for office or whether they simply like the concept, that people would say, yes, I want my candidate to take this kind of approach, they can voice their support signing on to the principles that we've talked about at any time at the website principledcandidates.org.
Heather Ballas, Danielle Gonzalez, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.